requests accepted. We will firstly go to the Aoraki Local Board, covering the National Policy Statement. We'll go to the Waitemata Local Board on helicopters, Aotea Great Barrier Local Board on helicopters, and Wahiki Local Board on helicopters as well. Starting with the Aoraki Local Board, and I welcome the Chair, Scott Milne, and Member Troy Churton to the meeting, and you're welcome to give your presentation now under the standing orders. I think I'm with you initially, Scott.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Chair Darby. Do appreciate your time and that of the councillors this morning. Just before we get underway, though, I think I might just go straight to Troy. Troy, do you want to comment on John Duguid's response to the Chair's question?
Yeah, thanks, and hi everybody. And you know, this is such a wonderful opportunity for you as governors. John made the really relevant point, which is a theme that throws through the submission we're about to make to you. Firstly, that there is actually no reference to special character area in the NPS or the Act formally, but you do have that discretion to retain special character area. If you don't do anything with special character, then by default it will fall away completely. But John mentioned two really critical parts of that that discretion that you have. One involved the site analysis, which has been done now by Noel Reardon and his team, and the only thing really you still need is the input from Aucklanders through a consultation. But the other thing he mentioned was that you also need to have that evaluated against the enabling legislation. I just want to remind you, I mean, Scott and I sat with you in a couple of meetings last year and presented to you in November, where you and your council advisors presented some pretty impressive data about the capacity and housing capacity under the unitary plan as it currently is for 900,000 odd feasible units based on a projected demand of around 350, and that was before you even applied the new NPS settings. And also you heard about the 3.5 or 6% of special character area wouldn't be an impediment to you achieving housing enabling objectives on the remaining 96.0% of available land. So both of the key criteria for you to exercise your discretion as governors today, in my view, have clearly been met, and you are liberated as governors. Scott, back to you.
Thanks, Troy. And actually, I just want to pick up from that point. You know, at that planning committee stage last year, when we first considered SCAs, I just want to remind you of what your submission to government did. It supported intensification, right? It supported intensification, but you were strongly opposed in two ways. And one was that enabling three-storey medium density across all parts of our urban environment via the medium density MDRS was not sensible. That's the first thing. And the second thing was that the MDRS would result in poor quality design outcomes. So I just want to take you back to what decisions you made last year.
Which is important, because hopefully as governors you can consistently apply your thinking into what you need to decide today. Look, the heritage assessment that has been done is really useful to help start that understanding of what may or may not be high within walkable catchments, but it shouldn't be used by you or by council advisors to you to suggest that, you know, a low or medium quality type of SCA area outside of a walkable catchment should be removed. Get away from this one size fits all based on high, low or medium quality for one moment. It's not called for by the law. And in short, the city areas with an SCA area outside of walkable catchments, regardless of a quality rating, should be retained for the reasons the previous speaker from Devonport pointed out. Remembering, like I said earlier, only 3.6% of the entire region's land area is affected in some way by an SCA overlay. Scott, you want to take? I'll take. I've just talked about how it's lawful to do this, and also when we look at the Hansard material that the Select Committee discussed about the changes to the Act and NPS, it's quite clear, especially from the comments of Nicola Willis, that you are meant to retain your discretion to be able to exclude special character areas from intensive housing development. I don't think it needs to be as complex a decision as sometimes it's made out to be. You know, the central government has set a mandate. I've suggested, and John Dogood seems to have agreed, that there are two criteria for you to exercise your discretion on special character. And so down to point 2 of a paper, I'm not sure if it's with me, I've only got 2 screens and I probably need 7. What the Council Planning Committee can and should do is to resolve to retain special character generally, as opposed to just focusing on high character. If retain that as qualifying matter for now, and put that position through to the public in the consultation process that you're going through. And I'll tell you why that's a really, in my view, a really prudent governance step to take in a second, if you can just bear with me. Retaining the SCA area, you've heard from the Devonport. We agree, Scott, I'm taking a point now because it's already been made, but there's intergenerational amenity value for you to consider. There's the local economic value. You know, if you're in Devonport, obviously your character area attracts people and brings a vibrant community. The same could be said for people who go to the hill area out in Manurewa or to parts of Remuera, etc. But most importantly, the data shows that retaining special character in our central areas and across the region simply does not impede the delivery of the housing supply that this bill and NPS require. So what Scott and I are saying to you is, and this is a thing called the precautionary approach, and Megan and John, who are seasoned planning people, will know the precautionary approach threads through everything that's happened in planning in this country for generations. And the precautionary approach that we are suggesting you take today is to firstly simply make the SCA that we currently have qualifying matter, acknowledge that Noel Reardon's team has made some quality related assessments of site by site, because that was what was required, and good job, you've done that, tick. But you don't have to say now, you don't have to take the paradigm that we're only going to look after high quality. You've done the assessment that was required. The other part was the assessment of enabling housing. So if you go out to market saying that you're going to retain SCA, you've done your assessment. Some of it seems like it might be high quality or not, but the public will have a view on that. The other good thing, and this picks up on a point that a question from Wayne Walker raised in the Devonport conversation. A further precautionary approach would be to then amalgamate whatever feedback you get from the consultation on this qualifying matter decision today, and review it again when you go through your statutorily required Section 35 Resource Management Act review of the unitary plan, which is a couple of years away, because Wayne very accurately referred to Schedule 15. But you still needed to do a further assessment to satisfy the NPS. The wonderful opportunity to get this right for the long term, for the intergenerational interests, for all people, including Shane Henderson's needs to represent people who find housing unaffordable. The best
Troy,
approach.
we're going to wrap it. Troy, we have to wrap it there. We're over 8
point of order, Chair. I just don't know if it's appropriate to name me like that.
Recommend that you simply move an amendment to recognise this.
Troy, we need to conclude, and thank you, Councillor Henderson. I heard that. I'm going to go and take 3 questions. We're well over time because we've gone to 8 minutes and more actually on the presentation. So I will take
A point of
3
order, Chair. I'm sorry. I don't think we should be restricted on questions because the speaker was allowed more time.
Okay, if members, I want to say this respectfully, if members do have a point of order, I've had 2 called on me and I haven't been told what the point of order is. So the points of order are outlined on the standing orders. If you could refer to that before you go to what your query is. And I just say that respectfully to our members. Okay, so I will now go to the questions I have, and I think the first one was from Councillor Watson, please.
Thanks for your presentation, Troy and Scott. My question goes to the liberating position, I think you called it, Troy, that we find ourselves in terms of our legal obligations. And I just wanted to check with you that I've got that right. In terms of our enabling housing, we already have 900,000 houses enabled through the unitary plan, plus whatever comes through the medium density proposals. And you're saying that in terms of the analysis that has been done on the special character areas, and I assume the analysis of only a couple of years ago through our unitary plan process, which I would suggest makes Auckland unique, that we've actually fulfilled our obligations in terms of identifying the special character areas and making the appropriate plea for them as an appropriate qualifying matter. And that at the very least should be what the public is also asked to comment on in terms of our consultation process. Is that correct?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Troy. Can you just refer to the legal advice that the local boards had?
Yeah, so that's absolutely right. Well, it wasn't just legal advice. We had, principal advisor advice that was possible, and we're saying that this is the way to go. You've got your site analysis. You've got an evaluation you can do against enabling housing. The data was produced last year. It can be reproduced. It just leaves you with that discretion on special character. And you need to make a decision about special character, as John Turgood said, because if you did nothing on special character, then by default it would completely evaporate and be gone forever.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, please, with your question.
Thank you, Chair, and I'd just like to to move the vote of thanks in advance of my question. Thank you. Troy and Scott, thank you very much. Auckland is very, very, very lucky to have local board members of your quality with this kind of knowledge around this, because I think it's very helpful for us all. To support you, my question is, if I was to put up an amendment on this, would the amendment to support your view be something like consult on keeping all current SCAs a qualifying matter pending a Section 35 RMA review of the Auckland Unitary Plan in 25-26? Would that be the sort of amendment you would look at to support your view?
Yes, and that is also legal and demonstrates good governance.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the final question is from, I'll go to Councillor Henderson, then Councillor Dalton, and then Councillor Hills. And then we will conclude there, please. Councillor Henderson, you are next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I actually should acknowledge the Chair for mentioning me by name, although I would be concerned that if I was the only one in this body that was actually concerned about housing supply, that would be a big concern for me. I do have a question, though, however, that are you saying that if our detailed staff assessment that is required by the law has found less than half of houses on a street have special character, are you saying that nevertheless we should maintain special character for those streets and to shut people out of home ownership on those streets?
Well, there's a number of points you raised there. First of all, we're not shutting anybody out of home ownership. And you mentioned a figure of 50%, where the figure is 75%. I think we have to take a more holistic view of what you as a governing body are trying to achieve here. I think there's a universal acknowledgement that character housing adds value to our city. It's how we retain it. The thrust of our submission is that we should just take our time. The process at central government level has been very rushed. And Chair Darby, if you'll permit me at the very end of this presentation, I'd like to quote a few sentences from a recent article. But the thrust of our proposal is that you are required by law to reassess the unitary plan in 2 to 3 years' time, and we should seek that breathing space, because once you tear these old houses down, you can't get them back.
And that the purpose of housing enabling will not be prejudiced in any way by retaining special character. That's critical, Shane.
Okay, we'll go to Councillor Dalton, please.
Sorry, Councillor Henderson, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. I'll now go to Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. One of the issues around this bill, and if we look at the presentation that was given to the Select Committee and the responses of the questions that came back from the Select Committee, is around urban design. So outside of the retention of the special character areas, do you have concerns for your particular area of Ōrākei around urban design should intensification take place? And I just want to pick up on the bit Chair Milne you said about being holistic. Being holistic means looking at all of Auckland, and there is a great wealth of Auckland that has had, well, perhaps wealth is the wrong word, that have really been burdened with the intensification of housing, poor design. Do you share concerns with design if it were to take place in Ōrākei?
Absolutely, Councillor Dalton, and thank you for your question. But this is not an Ōrākei problem. This is a region-wide problem. This is it's everywhere. Look, I'm actually up north at the moment in Rodney, and there are beautiful areas to walk with, right? But those aren't going to be special character. What we've got to do here is look to preserve what we've got. And Chair, I wonder if I could just quote from an NBR article. It said the Character Coalition Chair, Sally Hughes, said the group was appalled to discover officials had received no expert advice. Developers, and this is your point, Councillor Dalton, developers would inevitably build to the maximum height and bulk, and with a lack of any effective design standards, the result will be ugly and dysfunctional structures that will block the sun and light to existing homes. They will be unpleasant to live next door to and unpleasant to live in, she said. The Minister's own regulatory impact statement on the proposed law conceded that they were working under significant time constraints in developing it, and that there was no opportunity for consultation with external stakeholders. I think what we're asking you for here, councillors, is to exercise good governance. You can do this within the law, and you can do it for the benefit of your wider community.
Absolutely.
Final question is from Councillor Hills, please.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. Thank you both to Scott and Troy. I guess my concern or just a comment is that a lot of what you both have said is more opinion than the legal advice, and I've asked for advice directly from the ministry on this because I've been concerned about this. So I guess, what do you say to us where the advice we're getting from the ministry is that their law says that if we don't prove the heritage at each individual site, we cannot protect it. The heritage protection has been removed by this law, and we're trying to put it back on certain sites. What would you say to us as decision makers, where the ministry is saying directly to us, if we don't prove it, we could lose potentially more than we're trying to protect right now?
I might kick off, and Scott, you wrap. Councillor Richard, thank you. You have proven it. You've started that process, and the consultation process also helps you prove it. The way you've proven it is that you've had Noel Reardon's team do site-by-site assessments and using variable means. That's acknowledged that there are some character areas that may have a higher or lower alleged quality, but nonetheless, they have a quality, and you are liberated, like I said earlier, to go ahead and exercise a governance discretion to retain that character without getting bogged down by high or low quality assessments at this stage, because the other criteria that you need to, as per John Durgood's advice earlier, for retaining it all as special character is to look at the evaluation about how it impacts housing and enabling. And you've already got quite a lot of fodder on that from previous meetings, and I'm sure it will come through again.
Okay,
so you are empowered, Richard.
And thank you, Councillor Hills, for posing that question. We've had a good engagement there. We've gone about 100 or 200% over time, but so be it. So Councillor Simpson has moved the motion on the screen. Do I have a second, please?
Happy to second.
Yes, I'm happy. I indicated in the
Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Fletcher, I might have just missed that. So it is moved by Councillor Simpson, and seconded by Councillor Fletcher. The motion's on the screen. All those in favour say aye.
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 To the contrary, no. And declare that carried. Thank you, Orake. You've been very active in the MPSUD process, Scott. You're one of the boards that's been around our table upon invitation, and we thank you for that.
Thank you.
Chair, we're very grateful for the time.
Scott, I can't give more time. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to express our thanks. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Now, members, we will go to our second board out of 4, and that is the Waitemata Local Board. Deputy Chair Alexandra Bonham presenting on helicopters. Welcome, Alex.
Good morning, Chair, Your Worship, councillors, members of the Independent Māori Statutory Board, and everyone here. I've come to talk about our concerns around private helicopter movements that may, if not checked, become ubiquitous across all of Auckland's coastline. I wonder whether my presentation is here. Thank you. Please can we go on to the next slide? Thank you. Helicopters are noisy, gas-guzzling and intrusive. They interrupt conversations, the films you're watching, and then they interrupt you again. You go to bed, they wake you up. Their cumulative effects are real. Most private urban helipads are on the coastline where people walk, swim, kayak. The Marine and Coastal Area Act states that the coastal marine zone should be kept for general recreational activity. However, for safety reasons, helicopters do descend by urban beaches, blow clothes into the sea, cause sea spray, and go close to people's private windows. They impact on wildlife and the manner of sites of significance. These impacts do not seem to be considered by planners. Heliports can manage and mitigate impacts far better than proliferating private helipads in built-up residential areas. Next slide, please. Currently, helipads and private helicopter movements are non-complying activities in the Auckland Unitary Plan, which means that Council may grant if the adverse effects are minor or if the activity is not contrary to any existing or proposed plans, but they don't have to. If the effects are more than minor and the activity is contrary to existing plans, they may not grant consent. Next slide, please. The Unitary Plan requires us to maintain and enhance the quality of the environment, to control the emission of noise and to mitigate the effects of noise, and to maintain and enhance amenity values. Enabling helipads does not align with these objectives. Next slide, please. Quality Planning New Zealand suggests non-complying activities can be useful where you want consents only to be granted in exceptional circumstances. Without clear, strong objectives and policies, there is a risk that the threshold to meet the second test, that the proposal aligns with plans, may be set too low, allowing consents where it may not be desirable to do so. Our plans and policies are pretty clear, I think. We're trying to encourage mode shift to low carbon travel. We want people to be able to live well in closer proximity to each other. Next slide, please. Good practice could include stating clearly when non-complying applications like private helipads will be notified, limited notified, non-notified, and likely or not to be granted. This guidance should be linked to higher level objectives and policies. Next slide, please. Direction should come from our existing plans and policies endorsed by Mana Whenua, the governing body, and supported by the public, like the Climate Plan. Direction should align with the goals of our targeted rates. We should not consent to non-complying activity that undermines the goals of a targeted rate. Local board plans and resolutions should be taken into account. Recommendations to publicly notify might be heeded. Next slide, please. This judicial review into Auckland Council's decision not to notify a helipad atop a boat shed on Sentinel Beach, a popular public beach, suggests a laissez-faire approach is inadequate. The judge found Council to have been in error, not to fully consider the adverse effects on the public, nor did Council take the right issues into account. And it did take the wrong issues into account. Perhaps where an activity is non-complying, the legally cautious route is to say no or to notify. Helicopter impacts in a built-up area are likely to be more than minor on the public. Council is under pressure to enable more homes, yes, but these aren't homes. Next slide, please. The Waitemata Local Board recommended in December prohibiting private helipads in built-up residential urban areas. Advice we received is that it's too difficult to establish that private helicopter movements in these areas are never appropriate. I asked, though, when is it appropriate to grant the right to use a helicopter in an intensifying residential area in perpetuity? Please notify consents. When I go to meetings of residents in neighbourhoods affected, it isn't a handful of people who gather. It's over 100 with real-life experience. And I hear perhaps I'm a slide ahead. I'm very keen. If that could catch up with me, that would be wonderful. And they tell me vociferously, this group of 100 people looking at me, not with warmth because I've come from the council, but deep concern. And they tell me vociferously that private helipads are not suitable in any built-up residential area. So I'm on to the final slide, please. Number 10. We request a review of the complaints and compliance process. We have heard that complaining is onerous, confusing. Sometimes it is hard when there are a number of helipads nearby to know what particular resource consent is being breached, or to see what helicopter is going past. When resource conditions are breached, it seems no one is held to account anyway. Council could charge the consent holder for noise testing, but they don't seem to be using the tools they have to ensure compliance. So we request further data is collected to assess whether the current non-complying activity status of private helicopter use is appropriate or being managed appropriately. Are all impacts considered? Should consents be time-bound? Should they all be notified? We request you talk to residents in neighbourhoods affected. Residents are not pressure groups. They are us. We recommend clearer guidance for planners, including on when to notify and when to grant applications. Guidance that is accessible by applicants and the public. Council discretion does not equate to the discretion of individuals. Planners may want to say yes, but they are not obliged to say yes to a non-complying activity. If the effects are more than minor and do not align with the AUP, they must say no, to ensure a city that supports well-functioning human beings and a well-functioning planet. Sometimes they must say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chair Bonham, and members will take questions of the Deputy Chair now, representing the Waitemata Board. Are there any questions, members? Deputy Chair Bonham, I think you've done your job well and extremely thoroughly with the detail, and your requests are well articulated and clear. So we thank you. And we'll be discussing it later, and I'm sure you will be with us for that discussion. So thank you. Councillor Coombe, would you move the motion, please? And do I have a second, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
I'll second, Chair Angela.
Councillor Dalton will second. So we're acknowledging the submission today, this oral submission with the written material attached as well from the Deputy Chair of the Waitemata Board, Alexandra Bonham. So we'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye.
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 Thank you, Alex.
Contrary, no, and declare that carried. Thank you, Waitemata. Now we will go to Aotea, the Big Island, and we'll hear from Chair Izzy Fordham on helicopters as well. And I welcome Chair Fordham to the meeting. In your hands.
Kia ora, and thank you very much. Thanks, Kalinda, for putting that slide one as we go. So, kia ora, Chair Darby, Mayor Phil, councillors, independent Māori statutory board members and staff. Firstly, quick apology. For some reason, the draft version of our notice of motion appeared on your agenda and did not include the attachments. Hopefully you were able to access them through the links provided in the pre-reading. For your convenience, we have tabled the finalised NOM and attachments today along with this speech. So, slide 2, please, Kalinda. Thank you for the opportunity to inform you of a new issue that has come to Great Barrier Island and one of concern to us about the potential implications for the future and well-being of the island. I am here with the support of my board and community, our mana whenua, our tourism group, a petition of 600 plus signatures, our Auckland Central MP Chloe Swarbrick, and the added recommendation of the Environmental Defence Society. You will have read our notice of motion and relative documents, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have. But first, a bit more insight. Aotearoa is at the opposite end of the private helipad spectrum to Waiheke and even Waitemata. What we are trying to achieve is to prevent the proliferation of private helipads developing on Aotearoa. We have watched and we have learned, and we can see the potential outcome unless we do something now. To our knowledge, up until September last year, we had never received any resource consent applications for private helipads. In September, the board was notified of an application at 320 Grey Road, but this one application was for 2 private helipads on the same site, approximately 300 metres apart. The consent was subsequently granted, and for both pads. Then in November, a request came through for a private helipad at 101 Greenside Road, Midlands, followed by another in December in the same road at number 71, and another in January this year in the same road at number 21, and finally another in February in the same road at number 61. As you can see, pretty much all next to each other. Greenside Road is approximately 500 metres in length. To date, the site at 101 Greenside Road has been granted, the rest pending process. With all 5 applications received, the board had asked that each one be fully or publicly notified. All 5 times this has been declined. If I focus on the Grey Road site with the 2 helipads, one of the closest neighbours at number 300 is only 158 metres away from the southernmost helipad, and it was deemed in the decision document, as there are no physical works to be undertaken on site and compliance with the relative noise limits can be achieved, overall it is considered to be less than minor adverse effects upon any owners or occupiers of 300 Grey Roads, in other words, not considered an affected party. All the applications show proposed flight paths, mainly approaching from the sea, but nowhere could we find any comment from CAA. There seemed to be no consideration of the ever-changing flight paths of commercial airlines that service the island. For example, today Barrier Air have 7 flights coming to the island and 7 flights departing. Their flight paths can change at a drop of a hat. They are weather dependent, and there's occasions when they must totally alter their approach or departure. Surely this aspect needs consideration in the consenting process to see if there's any correlation. Could we have slide 3, please, Kalinda? I have read the report in your agenda and acknowledge the work that staff have done to date, but we need to do more. As the current process stands under the ACDP HGI, Aotearoa has no protection. We are vulnerable. The process favours the applicant. It fails to genuinely take into account the wider impacts. It deals only with the applicant and their application. And quote from planner Brad Allen, re 320 Grey Road. The ACDP HGI provides the helipad activity, both for tourism and private use. The consent and its effects are not outside of that anticipated by the planning framework. In this regard, Council must assess the application put forward by the applicant. In this case, it did involve 2 helipads on one site. So, Both helipads were granted to 320 Grey Road. Where is the faith and trust in the process that due diligence is happening? Why does the process show little consideration for the intrinsic values or need to safeguard our whenua and moana? This needs to change, as we believe currently it is leading to unintended outcomes. The issue lies with the current consenting process, as permitted by the ACD PHGI for private helipad consents. In the year of 2022, and in the spirit of Te Ture o Ratangi, surely we must put greater emphasis on those wider issues, the issues of respect for our wāhi tapu areas, respect for our amenity values, respect for the cumulative effects, respect for each other, and we must ensure that these are incorporated in documents as we move forward. Slide 4, please, Kalinda. In closing, the only solution for Aotea, and if the truth be known, the Hauraki Gulf Islands, is a plan change. The agenda report asks for 6 months in which to gain evidence to analyse flight log information from consent holders. With all due respect, that is no good for Aotea. What evidence will the team be asking of us? We have no historical flight log information, as we only have 2 consents recently granted, and surely decisions cannot be made on that information alone. The Environmental Defence Society recommends a plan change, and it should be factored into Council's work programme on an urgent basis. We support this rationale. Recently, Council managed a plan change around the issue of consents for water tank installation. It can be done. We urge the Planning Committee to actively consider a plan change. We are proactively seeking your help to help us avoid a pending situation. Waiting another 6 months allows for last attempt applications, and even then, we are not necessarily guaranteed one. That will only happen if it's deemed appropriate, as per the findings of the monitoring consents work. Can we not call for a halt or a holding pen of applications until the current work is completed? Heed the words of our mana whenua as they speak for us all. We are simply not confident that permission to operate private helipads on Aotea or regulations and planning guidelines governing these activities and land use has had adequate input by iwi hapu, nor full consideration of the long impact of these planning decisions on our whenua and moana in the future. It can be done. Aotea holds a special place in the Hauraki Gulf and Tamaki Makaurau. We need to act and act now. We need to think about all other islands in the Gulf. They too need your protection. Be bold and be brave. Waiting until the full plan review in 2026 is incomprehensible. I thank you for your time today and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chair Fordham, for that presentation. Good and thorough, and I'll take the first question from Councillor Desley Simpson, please. Councillor
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Izzy. That was great. Look, I'm just trying to get my head around what would happen if we limited the consenting for helicopters on Aotea. I mean, obviously people are asking for helipads for access, right? So if they didn't have that access, what are their other options? The other options are therefore only commercial, right? And would not that commercial go up? And then how do they get from the commercial airfield to where they want to go? I mean, I'm just trying to get my head around what would be the implications as a transport option. What other options are there? Because, you know, yeah, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm hearing people asking for
totally.
Convenience. It's not often. It's just when they want to go and visit, you know, for a holiday. It's not all day, every day.
No, fair question. The Claris Airport, as you know, in the centre of the island there, with the current applications before us, is only 7 kilometres away from any of them. Some slightly less. There is plenty of space at Claris for the landing of private helicopters. A lot of these are chartered, so they're just coming in, dropping off their customers, and then they can arrange pickup from there to go to their destination. It's really not in the too hard basket. And I think wider consideration needs to be given to Our people, our mana whenua, I can think of 2 of the applications. One in particular was granted near a power site and another one over a Waihi Tapu area in Midlands. And there doesn't seem to be any respect for those conditions. They may not be listed yet on council database, but that should not take away the significance of those areas. And there was a letter from Charles Napier, the whakakare for Ngāti Rehau and Ngāti Waikato Trust on that very point. So there's plenty of space, as I say, at Claris and also at Okiwi.
Okay,
and let's be honest, let's keep your local economy, keep your local economy running as well.
So supplementary, Mr.
Thanks,
Chair.
Councillor.
Supplementary. So you would need an increase in taxi or some sort of vehicle transportation from the commercial airport to wherever these people are going.
Yes,
I mean, you don't
lots
have
of these people already have.
Yep.
Sorry, lots of these people already have vehicles at their homes, or they're parked at a space that's provided for long-term parking in the Claris area as well.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Chair Fordham.
We've heard, we did hear one side comment that one person was doing it just to add value to their property, which to me just sickens me, to be perfectly frank, but that's by the by.
Okay, I'll go to the question of Independent Māori Statutory Board Member Karen Wilson. Kia ora, Karen.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Izzy. Great presentation, very well done. You've actually partially answered most of my queries as you got onto the kōrero from mana whenua. So I just want to emphasise on that. In a normal course of events, you would have a say as mana whenua, and I'm assuming you're bringing together all the commentary from your community, including mana whenua. So do you have any other indication of how they're feeling about not being able to participate in this, that they're supporting you as the local board? So I was going through all the documentation, but you talked about a PAR. So there is some sense of loss and desperation almost, in the sense that they won't be able to participate given the process in identifying significant sites by council hasn't been completed or they haven't been logged. Is that right? Am I getting the right kōrero there?
That's you are indeed. You're pretty spot on. There's still an immense amount of work to be done around our sites of significance for a mana whenua. And we did present to this very committee back in July, I think it was, Councillor Darby, where I brought along the island-based archaeologist and well-respected Don Prince, and also board member Professor Valmain Toki, to talk about this very thing and the urgency and necessity to get these sites logged into the system before it's too late. So yes,
thank you. Thank you.
You're pretty spot on.
Thank you, Chair Fordham. That's fantastic. Good account of the issue through the lens of Aotea. So thank you for that. Councillor Coombe, all the actions in your ward, Councillor Coombe, so you will move this. And do I have a second from another councillor, please? Or Mayor?
I'll second Councillor Cooper.
Councillor Cooper, I hear the voice of Councillor Cooper as a second. So the motion is before us. Thank you so much, Chair Fordham. The motion is before us, acknowledging your contribution here today on behalf of the committee. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. To the contrary, no, and declare that carried. Which takes us to our last public board input, and it comes from the island of Waiheke, and the chair of the Waiheke local board, Chair Kath Handley, and member Robin Tucker. And I'll now hand to Chair Handley and member Tucker to make their presentation. Kia ora both.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi mehana to you all. Thank you. I know you've got a huge day ahead of you, and that you'll be dealing with this one now later in the afternoon, but I would like you to be mindful when you do, when you come to this item of these presentations. I want to tatoku my colleagues in the other boards, and in particular Aotea Great Barrier, Izzy, and what she said. They are indeed at the other end of the spectrum. I'm going to talk now about Waiheke, and Robin will join in answering any questions at the end of this. I've called this the unforeseen consequences of the Hauraki Gulf Islands District Plan. And the quote there is just random. It's taken off Facebook just the other day. 5 helicopters have flown past in 15 minutes. Wait, make that 6. Lunch must be over. Does anyone know where I can purchase those Stinger portable missiles? The reason I say unforeseen is that the intentions of the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan were seemingly derailed by the industry itself, the helicopter industry, the aviation industry, in haste in its final stages. And our board questions its current interpretation, which has led to our request for a declaratory judgment in the Environment Court. Next slide, please. Our purpose is to, I don't know whether, oh yeah, there it is, thanks. Our purpose is to ensure that every resource application for helicopter pads with associated movements and flight paths is publicly notified. That would enable other users of the airspace, our critical services, the community, environmental specialists and advocates to contribute meaningfully. It would address the issues of the loss of public amenity, environmental habitat, the right to quiet enjoyment of life, which is, by the way, the main reason that we live here. The current digression from the local board plan, which is critical, and public safety concerns, which are even more critical. Next slide, please. Thank you. So where are we now? This slide shows you where Waiheke is. Council, I see in the report it says 49 consented helipads. In fact, yesterday another one was, so it is 50. 2 more applications came in this week. We've got several under consideration. We have 50 helipads in 92 square kilometres. That should be, not miles. Singapore has 6, including 2 military ones. 728 square kilometres, 6 million people. Los Angeles 41, Tokyo has 80, but most of those are emergency evacuation locations from high buildings, so they're not in use. I think that the 100 is where we will go by the time, easily at this rate, by the time that the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan becomes integrated into the unitary plan. It's absurd. It certainly can't have been foreseen or have been the intention of those creating the Hauraki Gulf Islands District Plan. With respect to complaints, oops, sorry, I've just got to move my mouse across 2 screens, which is technically difficult for me. With respect to complaints, it says in paragraph 44 of the report that you've got that there haven't been any complaints between 2016 and 2022. That's simply not true. I don't know where the data was gathered, but it can't have been from council. The complaints of just one helipad at Cable Bay are legendary in the annals of compliance here at council. Nobody asked the local board for our complaints. And we do ask that you don't take that reference at face value. It will lead you to an incorrect conclusion. And just to give you an example, a neighbour of the same place, Cable Bay, writes, I made several complaints in 2021 breaches by Cable Bay of its helipad helicopter land use. And she names who they went to in licensing and regulatory compliance and to compliance monitoring. This is a quote, all were acknowledged and some action appears to have been undertaken. And what about the petition you received last year? 1,378 people signed that over just a matter of days. Next slide, please. So why do we need to move urgently to notification? We have a single vision which has been consulted in our community and endorsed by, I think, more than 96% of the people who responded and the groups. It's enshrined in our local board plan, which is the vision is Waiheke as a sanctuary in the Gulf. But our reality is now an ever increasing disruption to our enjoyment of life by frequent disruptive helicopter activity, even in our quietest natural environments. So the quote I've included in this presentation is again just off Facebook. It's from a tour operator, an eco tour operator. I led a group on a hiking trip last weekend. They were appalled at the number of helicopters flying over with so much noise trails at the back of Onitangi Sports Park, Whakanaiwha and Rocky Bay. Whakanaiwha is our regional park. Feel very sorry for those in quiet areas like Rocky Bay having to put up with it, not to mention the impact on wildlife in these areas. And I have to say that while we're talking about human impacts, there is no environmental consideration in the consenting process. Thanks. Next slide, please. Just have to move my mouse and try and coordinate with you. One more. Oops. Won't be a sec. I want to raise the issue of other users of airspace because I suppose we're very used to managing our land in our roles and not thinking about the other users of the same airspace. There is no apparent relationship between planning and consulting planners and other established services, including critical air infrastructure. I include the one airfield we've got, licensed airfield, the Waiheke Airfield, which is managing flights in and out of aircraft, nor the Westpac Rescue Helicopter. They can't submit if helipad consents are not notified. Both are operated by highly seasoned air operators. Their pilots are visible, or their operations are visible to the other helicopters, but the other helicopters now generally have their transponders turned off, and therefore their movements are not necessarily visible to the light aircraft and Westpac helicopter. So that's really important because we know, because we trace these on apps now. We hear helicopters, and there were 4 of us yesterday just being interrupted perpetually working at home by helicopter movements. Only 2 of those were able to be traced. So the helicopters are deliberately turning off transponders so that they can't be their movements can't be traced. That is because of the work we're doing here with respect to trying to get some control. The operator, the co-director of the airfield, says the concentration of uncharted helipads is unique in New Zealand and poses a risk to air traffic and those living beneath. In our view, no further helipad should be approved without public consultation. And that man, who lives in Hong Kong but comes here frequently, is previous director of Freeport International Airport for 20 years. We just had an application last week which is right in the flight path of the airfield and very close to the Westpac helicopter. Neither of those, the Westpac helicopter helipad isn't on council's list, is invisible to planners, and is never mentioned in consent applications. That's appalling. Sorry, I'm running out of time. I do get that. The Westpac helicopter did 182 trips here last year in emergency situations. I would like you to consider their needs when you look at particularly the last clause in the officer's recommendations, which is clause I, which is their interpretation of the Act and our need to go to, oh, by the way, the Westpac helicopter has said categorically, and I have it in writing, all consents should be notified. We have asked you to, so the next slide, please. We've asked you to seek a declaratory judgment in the Environment Court. We still ask for that. Council staff have suggested you close off that option. Please keep it open. You may need it. We would like other airspace users to be automatically consulted in the planned review, especially the fully consented airfield and the helicopter trust. We don't accept the planner's assertion that CAA, the Civil Aviation Authority, has suggested the airspace is safe. They say, quote, in my mind, the situation is not completed at all, but still in the early stages. I see it as a project. This is the Deputy Chief Executive, that we're still scoping. There are significant safety concerns, not caused by helipads, but the activity that they support. Next slide, please.
We do have to wrap very soon.
Yeah, get that. I think it's the last slide anyway. Sorry, can we have a slide change, please? Have we got it?
No,
I
we don't.
believe that's all we have.
Oh, okay.
Please.
Thank you.
Henley.
Thank you. I would ask, I will take any questions, but I do thank you very much for your time, and I'm sorry to put pressure on your schedule.
Thanks, Chair Handley, and thanks, Member Tucker, who we haven't heard from, but we know is in support with Chair Handley today. Questions, please, from the members, and I have a question first from Councillor Simpson, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Kath. Look, three just quick questions. Westpac helicopter, when they're needed, do they just land anywhere, or do they have to land on a helipad?
No, they can land anywhere, but they prefer a number of destinations. The majority go to the sports field in the centre of the sort of urban end of the island, but they can land anywhere. So they need to be able to traverse the skies, if you like, safely, but in an emergency setting. So, you know, they don't have time on their hands.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a chart or a map of the 50 helipads showing their locations and, you know, where they're coming from? And no,
and that is a major concern for the airfield and for all flyers. So there should be a chart of the flight paths and the locations so that they can take those into account, but there appears not to be one at all. That contrasts with, say, the airfield, because civil aviation, you know, that is chartered flight paths in and out of the airfield, fully regulated, but council's flight paths that are being consented by planners aren't chartered. So we've asked for that. We don't have it.
Next question is Councillor Dalton, please. Councillor Dalton.
Yes. Lost my mic. Hi, Kath. Thank you. The first presentation at the workshop last time was really informative. This is just outstanding. Thank you. You just referred briefly to recommendation I, and then you had it in your last slide as well. Can you just elaborate on your concerns there, please?
Sure. I think it shouldn't be there. And the reason is you're being asked as a governing body to say that the planners are interpreting the Act correctly. I don't think that's the domain of governance. That's the domain of, it's a specialist domain. So I personally know that there is significant disquiet around the interpretation of the Hauraki Gulf Island District Plan. So that's the first part of that. The second is just to keep the option open of a declaratory judgment in the Environment Court. That is the cheapest, fastest way to get to an answer here without waiting 6 months. And that would serve council very well in terms of the next steps. So I would just advise just not agreeing to I at all. Thank you, Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Kath.
Thank you, Councillor Dalton. And the final two questions come from Councillor Newman, followed by Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Newman, in your hands.
Good morning, Kath. Yeah, look, an interesting presentation. I'm not sure if this needs to be addressed as a resource management and planning issue or as an issue with respect to gaps in terms of the Civil Aviation Act. Now, you have identified, obviously, that Civil Aviation Act addresses a narrow range of issues, and that what we're dealing with here is really, by comparison, Wild West. But is this a matter which is properly addressed from a regulatory perspective in terms of an amendment to the Civil Aviation Act, or do we have to try and address this just in terms of trying to get some safety in the skies beyond those flight paths around airports and etc.? Are we having to deal with this over and above that until Parliament acts on it?
Yes, and there's no guarantee here that Parliament will actually do, at the moment, the way that the CAA bill is drafted reduces the opportunities for the Minister of Transport to, for instance, declare Waiheke or Waiheke and Aotea Great Barrier quite special designation airspaces. There is an absolute responsibility here. I think that one of the issues for us is, frankly, the responsibility carried by planning to make decisions around flight paths and what's happening in the air. But we can at least take some steps to reduce the congestion and the safety risks and the unbearable consequences of having our airspace so congested in our terms. Thanks.
Chair, if I can make one further point and question to Kath. Kath, I mean, I can understand the problem that you're identifying, but you'll understand my conundrum. As a councillor, I have no expertise on civil aviation matters, and I feel that, whilst I want to help, I really feel that the CAA needs to clarify this particular matter, because that is the primary function of the CAA, and what we're trying to do here is trying to come up with something as an interim measure with no clarification as to how this is going to be resolved by Parliament, and that's a real problem here.
Yeah, and it is, and CAA, the Deputy Chief Executive, is coming to meet here with us and others, and to take kind of, if you like, a more holistic view. But at the moment, it is our view that we need to seek a declaratory judgment in the Environment Court, because that is where the expertise sits. And I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. And the final question comes from Councillor Fletcher, please.
No, my question was the same as Councillor Newman, and I withdrew in the sidebar. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Thank you, Chair Handley and Member Tucker, for the presentation today. Good information. And please come back when we come to this item later on, and there will be some Chair recommendations going forward to, in addition to the staff recommendations that have been worked up with engagement with you, the other boards, and Councillor Coombe. We'll see those later. So we'll invite you back to observe that part of the meeting.
Kia ora, thank you.
Good.
Am I moving this?
Councillor Coombe, I guess you're
very happy to move
this. Good. And do I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Councillor Dalton, thank you. It's moved and seconded. The motion is before us, expressing appreciation for the submission here today from the Waiheke Local Board. All those in favour say aye.
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 Contrary, no. I declare that carried. Thank you, members. That takes us to item 7. There is no extraordinary business that's been raised with me prior to the meeting, so we go to 8. But before we go to 8, actually, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, and we will be back at 11:43.